Welcome to Would We Move to Australia? For people that are new to this channel, this video, we are Brits that have moved to the United States. We live in Las Vegas and we've recently visited Australia. And ourselves are wondering, would we move there? Especially having not considered living or even traveling to Australia until about 3 months ago.
Yes, and it's often a question we get because I think for a lot of people that watch this channel
From the UK in
from the
particular.
UK, there's a few places around the world that we're always considering. The other place that people are often wondering is what it's like to live in the USA, which is mostly our channel, but also Australia. Yeah. So we thought we would go to Australia and see what it was like and make an assessment of whether it is a place that we would choose to move to. We're going to answer this from two scenarios. If we were living in the UK and had never moved to the USA, would we choose to move to Australia? And then we're going to answer the question that I'm thinking most of you want to know, and that is, given our scenario now that we live in the USA, in Vegas, would we choose to move to Australia? But starting on the easier one first. So would we move had we have been in the UK, never had this experience of living in the US? To summarize, yes, absolutely, we would do it because there are so many things that we appreciated and saw about Australia that we think is over and above what Britain is offering, especially if there is something about the UK that is just not quite right for you.
For me, yeah, I would. Weather is king. The UK has weather, of course, but it's rain and cloud and grey, and you have to hope, pray and do a sun dance to hope that you're going to get 2 weeks of summer. Immediately, just on that basis, I would leave the country given an opportunity to go anywhere that has the sun. However, what I find with Australia is it's so remarkably similar to the UK, just with better transport, better weather, better food, somewhat better homes, depending on where you are, even though they are more expensive. And it seems like a much better social etiquette, maybe the wrong word, but social dynamic, that's the right word. Why would you not want to go there, particularly if you're a fit and active person? It offers you all of those things whilst maintaining so much of the normal British way of life.
So for those of you that you don't really know which you would pick, Australia or the USA, the upside of Australia is it's so much closer to home, and it's like the better version. It's the kind of, I don't know,
England plus.
Plus.
Yeah, it's like, do you want to fly economy or premium economy?
And everyone there, I mean, this is obviously not going to be representative of everyone, and this is only based on our experience of going to Melbourne, Tassie and Sydney. It just seems that the quality of life there is so much better than what we were experiencing growing up in the UK. Now, the two places that we visited mainly was Melbourne for 9 nights, and I say two places, Sydney was only for a day, but I'm going to break it down in Melbourne versus Sydney. Melbourne for me was interesting in that I did like it. There were lots of positives, and there are lots of reasons why I think it is better than living in the UK. However, I think that weather factor is quite crucial, and there was just something missing in Melbourne for me. There was, and I said this to Ant, there was a vibrancy. I can't quite put my finger on it. But if I was older, given my family and friends in the UK, I'm not sure I would choose to pick Melbourne over the UK for me personally. But if I was younger and just wanted an experience and go somewhere else, I would have absolutely have done it. But I'm not 100% sure I would pick Melbourne over the UK.
Being an older person?
Yeah,
being a younger person?
Yeah, older person, which is interesting.
I wouldn't disagree massively. I would say from my perspective, Melbourne isn't a huge upgrade in weather. It definitely is an upgrade, but it is literally economy to premium economy. There's a notable difference, but is it worth it? Is it worth leaving your family behind to maybe have an extra week's summer in terms of consistency? That's where the question comes in. However, what I would say for me with Melbourne is it does have very quick access to the beach. It does have a really good transport system, which we do have the underground, but here for me is where it separates. In order to use the UK's best transport, which I would say is the underground, you've got to live in London, and you have to have London money. Now, Melbourne, even the CBD area, wasn't much more expensive than where we lived outside of London. A little bit, but not that much. But firstly, you've got much better career opportunities. It pays more money. You do have the better weather. You do have better food than where we lived in the outskirts, and it costs you the same. So that's where you have to balance it up. So I actually agree. If I was younger, no kids, not that we have kids, I would jump at the chance, even to experience it for 3, 4, 5 years. Now I'm 38. UK, knowing what I know about it now, I'd really struggle with whether or not I would leave the UK, if that's where we live, to go and live in Melbourne. Sydney is a different
completely different thing.
We only spent one night there. Selena actually arrived in Sydney before I did, because you had to get there really early for work. You got a 4 a.m. flight or 5 a.m. flight, and then I arrived later in the day. But what was interesting is Selena had messaged me when she had landed, be like, this is the place, 10 minutes into her journey. And I'm like, what is she talking about? Maybe she's delirious. I then landed 3 or 4 hours later. I was 15 minutes later. I'm like, this is also the place for me.
And I cannot, there's something that you cannot describe. And for those of you that, we've had a lot of messages from people saying there's just something about America. I just love America. I can't put my finger on it. It's the same thing for Sydney for me. As soon as I landed there and I was in that car and I'm looking around, it just felt so good. And I enjoyed every moment of being there, whether it was at Bondi Beach, the short period we had in the CBD area. I felt good, I felt happy, I liked the weather. Of course, I don't know what it's like across the year, but there was just something very special about Sydney in that one day.
Yeah, and I think it's a measurable difference from where you've come from, and I think that's the key part. Melbourne feels so similar. If you've got family and good friends, do you want to sacrifice so much of what life is about for that? Whereas Sydney doesn't feel similar. Although the road signs and cars are similar and things like that, the way it feels and the way it presents is such an upgrade. It's like going from economy to business. I want to take that. So I think we both had that same feeling that whether we were young, 25, or whether we are 40 with kids, I think we would...
older, any age,
we would move to Sydney.
If you get the chance to go to Sydney, we would do it.
Yeah, which is actually contrary to what most people said to us, at least the people that I spoke to. Everybody was on the Melbourne side, and they thought that is the city, that's where you should live.
Except my friends and family were on the Sydney side.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
I don't know if this is...
They were all non-English Brits.
So I think
I spoke to.
Exactly, and I think that's the difference. My friends and family are born and raised from the southeast of England, and they all preferred Sydney over Melbourne.
Whereas all of the people that I spoke to are all Australian natives that preferred Melbourne.
Now we're going to answer the question that you've all been waiting for, and that is whether we would choose to move to Australia now that we live in the USA. And what I'm going to tell you all is that Ant and I have not discussed this at all, so what we say here will be a complete surprise to both of us. It's completely unrehearsed.
Do you think it will be a surprise though?
I don't know what you're going to say. I haven't actually really thought about it myself, so
I
I don't know what I'm going to say. So I'm going to ask you, what's your thoughts on whether you would move, and answer it from, would you move to Melbourne or would you move to Sydney?
What we should point out is we are currently here on green cards, and you can't leave the country for extended periods of time without the right of leave or something, like a leave of absence, like we're at school. So you have to be permitted to stay out. If it was the case of work needed us to travel for some months, or we got a 3-year secondment over, I would go to either of the places, but I don't think that's the true question. It's, would you pack up, leave here to live and stay, even if you 10 years later you decide to come back or go to England, with the mindset that you're going to live in Australia? Okay, I liked Melbourne a lot more than Selena did, even though the weather wasn't for me. There's something that just gelled with me about Melbourne in some ways, and maybe it was the jiu-jitsu family, I don't know, but yeah, it was just like the ability to get around was so easy.
You like that style of living?
Yeah, it was just, you didn't have to have a car. You can leave the car parked for 2 weeks if you want, and I like that. I wouldn't leave Las Vegas for Melbourne because I am happy here. So there's so many unknowns with packing up your life and going to somewhere that you've experienced for a short period of time, which would be fine if you're coming from a place where you're not happy or you're not sure you're happy. I'm so sure I'm happy here that I'm just opening myself up to risk that I don't need. The only things that are really lacking here is there's no greenery, which, having gone to Australia, when I go back to UK, it reminds me every time. I love that. I hate the rain, but I want forests, which is ridiculous. So the answer for Melbourne would actually be no. Sydney's slightly different. We only experienced 1 night and 2 days there, but it felt so good that if someone was to say right now, you can move to Sydney, Australia, we're going to give you very well paying jobs.
Yeah, financials don't come into it.
Okay, financials don't come into it.
As in, you know you'll be financially good.
The reality of it would be, I want to go over there and I want to spend a month.
Just to be sure.
To be sure. But I would seriously consider the move to Sydney. All I can say is I would really consider the move to Sydney, but I am happy here. I just don't know that I wouldn't be happier there. Whereas Melbourne and England, I know for sure I wouldn't be happier, and that's just opening the risk for the hope that somehow something really does grab me. But I think the lifestyle, the feel of the weather, all of that stuff, there's a reason why Sydney costs 2 or 3 times as much to live as most places. So I would want to spend a period of time there to assess whether or not, right now it would be a consideration.
A big lean towards yes.
Yes. No, because the answer of would I do it? So I always try and put in my mind, if somebody arrives right now and says, get on a plane, would you go? Only if I could assess it before. If they said, you have to make the decision now, no. I'm too happy here to risk that move. And the reason I'm saying it like that is because it wouldn't have mattered at any point in the last 20 years of my life if somebody would have arrived in England and went, I've picked a country that has sun, leave to that. I would just got on a plane.
I don't care where it is.
Yeah, you don't even have to name the country. Has it got sun? Yes, let me out. Whereas I'm so fulfilled and content here, it'd be a tough one. Even though Sydney does feel like it gives more than Vegas. The other bit that I would say is we have really good friends here now. So we've got friends around our age. We have people come and visit us. So would I give that up? Knowing that it's way harder, it's 10 hours here for the people in the UK that come and see us. It's going to be a 20-hour journey. That means less people are going to come. They're not going to have as much time. It costs a lot more money. Would I be prepared to give up the friends we have here plus the friends we have in the UK for the chance of Sydney being better? It's tough. How about you?
Melbourne, absolutely not. There's no way.
So yours is even more categorical.
Yeah, so I'm clear. There is not enough about Melbourne that would make me ever want to leave the US for Melbourne. Sydney is a completely different thing. I will go back to, there is something about a place that you instinctively know where you just feel so comfortable and the things that you like about it and makes you feel positive. Sydney had it, and that's very telling from one day. I agree with Anne, one day is not enough to make that decision as to whether we would choose to move. But what I can tell you is coming back here, I felt very different. And I felt different in the sense of I felt foreign here, and I didn't feel foreign in Sydney. I felt far more at home, which in itself tells me a lot. If we were citizens here and work had said you've got an option to go there, absolutely, I wouldn't even think about it. I would go and live in Sydney for a few years. Ant's right, we've got a lot going for us here in terms of our friends. I like my life here. I'm very content and happy. If I'm being honest, Sydney's better than here.
Definitely, and that's the thing you have to consider. Although we spent a lot of time in the US, and well before living here, we were coming here frequently, once, twice a year. We haven't lived in other places in the US, so we don't know that these types of things aren't available. What we do know is where they are available, they're either homeless shelters currently, or they're so expensive that it's it's not attainable for us right at this moment. Whereas, yes, I understand for people living and working around Sydney, Sydney has become very, very expensive, but it is actually attainable for us in our situation. Not saying we'd have the most lavish home.
For me, it's not even about whether America has something similar to Sydney. What I recognised being in Australia for that period of time was how more similar we are culturally. And that does have an impact on the places you choose to live. Not to say that anyone's made us feel uncomfortable here. And there's a lot about the American way that we really like in terms of their push, in terms of work ethic. So that's where I don't know. If I went to Australia, I would see the opposite, and it's actually more like England. And actually now having this experience, I wouldn't like it. But Sydney, initially, I would say,
as the place, once you get into the politics and the taxes and all of that stuff, that would change a lot. Which is a big part of why we love America. The individual freedoms and freedom of choice is a significant part of why we like it here.
But something I would say that I took away from going to Australia and making that assessment is, just from our channel in general, when people have such diverse opinions, I truly believe there are so many places that we could all go to and it would work for us. I think the most important thing that you have to do as any individual is recognize if the place that you're in is wrong for you. Because I think what we're talking about is just perfecting where we would like to go, which I think is a huge privilege in itself.
And that's what makes it different. It's like we're in such a privileged position that oh, my seat wasn't at 38.5 degrees. That's the way I
exactly.
like it. It's
So
ridiculous.
I want to put some context here. So what I think is far more important to focus on is whether you like or dislike, or how much you dislike where your current condition, and if you're unhappy there. And if you are unhappy, the thing that I've learned over the years from moving to the US and now visiting Australia, and also talking to others that have made the move, whether it's here or Australia, is there are better places. I didn't expect to like Australia as much as I did, and I think the thing that I've recognized the most is that difference in culture, and I felt Australia was more aligned to our culture. That doesn't mean that we're not super happy here. So currently today, I wouldn't move to Sydney. I think I'm content and happy and need to give here a lot longer. But should the opportunity arise to go to Sydney, I don't think I would say no. We would love to know your opinions on our overall trip to Australia, but also on this video. And are there any questions that you have for us that we can answer in another video? Thanks for watching.